Hey, this is Notzer, and this is a user-submitted replay. Nick has arrived, is in the Tier 9 Soviet destroyer, Tashkent. Used to be the Trashkent, not the case any longer. And we're going to see how Nick does on Hotspot. Now, Nick has shared with me, it's worth watching to the end. Okay, Nick. We'll see what you got. And the enemy gearing. Oh, he's having a bad day. Runs into the friendly North Carolina, gets taken out by Nick. So the Soviet DDs don't really see a lot of play. Why is that? Well, their gameplay isn't very dynamic in the sense that you use your torpedoes and your guns. Couple that with a pretty awful concealment, if you really consider it, especially the mainline Soviet. It just turns people off. You know, if I want to play a ship with bad concealment or the ability to use guns and torpedoes, and your torpedoes aren't a significant part, well, I'll just play a cruiser line in X, you know. That's just the nature of the beast. But the Soviets do pretty good damage, right? And they have high velocity. They're pretty fun. It's just not, like, super exciting to watch sometimes. But not the case with Nick. Nick is getting close. He's incredibly brave, in my opinion, with this kind of concealment, but he gets close enough to use his torpedoes on the enemy North Carolina, and friendlies are just going crazy on the North Carolina to the point where it looks like he's actually going to die before the torpedoes make contact. Don't you love that? Nick gets another kill, though, and they've got 2 bases to the enemy's 0, and the enemy's trying to contest the C point. And Nick's team's doing great. You know, everyone has arrived. A and B is completely theirs. They don't have to do anything. They just have to defend and allow the enemy team to make tons of mistakes, right? I wouldn't share a game that would be super one-sided. So, yes. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go according to plan. Friendly Bismarck seems to be perishing very quickly. And who's going to get the kill shot on that friendly Bismarck? Does look like a cruiser or a DD is firing his guns, and it's a DD. Chungmu. This Kovarovsk is dead in the water. I think he disconnected or something. Bad luck for him. He's taken out. Looks great, huh? Everything's going swell. Enemy battleship is on fire. He's 75% health. Nick's gonna do some damage to him. Hopefully get another fire. Although it does look like he's running into the fire chance that I have to deal with a lot. And he wants to keep everything in front of him. Anytime you're in a Soviet, you want to make sure that you're only close to the target you want to do damage to. You have a velocity advantage. Your torpedo range is another matter, but you have a velocity advantage, so you don't want to be close to other targets other than your primary. You could risk taking damage. And the build that Nick has gone, he's using heal. Now, I know people are, oh, heal's so selfish. Not really. Yeah, you can't smoke. However, it allows you to take more potential damage. And potential damage is absorbing damage meant or could be meant for someone else. You know, people look at the raw damage that something like a battleship absorbs, and they say, oh, well, that's great. What about the raw damage that is potentially fired at a DD or a cruiser, and they just maneuver out of the way? They're not mitigating it with their armor, they're mitigating it with their maneuverability. That's just as valuable, if not more, considering battleships will waste salvo after salvo on the target. So don't look at it as, oh, heal, you don't provide anything to your team. In fact, heal is just as useful, if not more so, depending on the strategy that you employ. Especially since they nerfed into the ground smoking for battleships. You know, most battleships aren't going to be smart enough to hold their fire. They're greedy. They want to fire from smoke. You're really only smoking out small caliber in most cases. Yeah, sure, team play, I get it. And some people are like, oh, you're Shimakaze. You think there's going to be team play Oh, that's really cute. I know, I know. But regardless, you have to play to your build, and clearly Nick is playing to his build. He's openly firing on targets at maximum range, and he's just fortunate that it's a Tirpitz and has terrible dispersion. Otherwise, he might take a little bit of chip damage just from being out in the open. And finally, the Tirpitz lands a shot. But he also pulls a Notzer, and it's not a good place to pull a Notzer. Is there ever a good place to pull a Notzer? Well, no. I'm not going to lie to you. Running into an island is never good. Unless, of course, you were going to die to a torpedo or something like that. That's different. That's not pulling an Notzer. That's a strategic, a tactical beaching. Okay. Tactical Notzer even. But yeah, the Tirpitz, he's done. And I don't even know that he's got a secondary build, right? Because Nick's getting in close enough that his secondary should be able to fire, but clearly they're not. So he takes out another target. For whatever reason, his team has chosen to die as well. This was a game that they could never lose. You have 2 bases to the enemy's 1. Just make them come to you. There should be something in the game that gives this, like, a running tally to signal to players, it's okay, what you're doing is good. Like some sort of continued capture. In a game like Overwatch, they have an on fire indicator, and the longer you have a capture and the longer you benefit from the capture, you generate this on fire effect. And it doesn't actually change the power level of your character, it just signifies that you're doing something good for the team, for the success. So I think you could have something. I see all too often a team that has a clear advantage just, oh, let's kill them all, no cap kill all sort of situation, but that's not what you're in. So enemy is taken out. Unfortunately, the enemies take out a friendly at the same rate. It's 5-4. And he's got the broadside of this battleship, which is on fire, and he's using AP, which is great. And he is aiming at the top of the hull. He's going for that superstructure. If you're given a chance, superstructure AP is super solid. There's also a super solid location, if given a chance. It's the side, the broadside of the bow and the stern. That's usually a low armor zone as well. And your AP shell of something like a Soviet cruiser should be able to penetrate easily. But obviously, it's a harder target to hit. It's a smaller target, and it's angled in a odd degree, especially at range. So far, Nick's, he's doing fine. Looks like the enemy battleship is hoping, or maybe he was hoping to get a broadside, but Nick's teammate saw it coming, and he broadsided the enemy first. So, 2 enemy battleships, and Nick has torpedo range, which is more than can be said about the Tier 10 Soviet destroyer, Khabarovsk. They really nerfed the torpedo systems into the ground with that one, but the Tashkent, 8 kilometers, you could use it. And the friendly is taken out. So 2 battleships to a Soviet DD at sea point. There's also a Dmitry Donskoy behind, and oh god, they lose another. There's no reason for this. Look at the advantage they have in points. Why are you throwing your ships away, people? Make the enemy come out to you. And it looks like an enemy DD is going for A point, and he's being spotted right now. Maybe he's openly firing at Nick's friend over by B point. I don't know. Yes, Nick's friend by B point is very low. So Nick has arrived, doing a good play here. He's waiting to not capture. He knows he's not going to capture, but he's waiting to deny the point gain for the enemy. And they're all firing on the friendly cruiser, gonna die. Nick sends out his torpedoes. The Tashkent is interesting because it has 3 sets of 3. So you could theoretically decide, okay, I've got plenty of torpedoes on the target. I don't need to send all 3 sets. It's nice that it exists like that, for that potential decision. Okay, I'm going to have, 4 or 6 torpedoes make contact. I don't need to do it. It does delay a torpedo send by, what is it, like a second? That's a minor gripe, considering the versatility that it does offer. And he gets his torpedoes out on one of the battleships, and that battleship's carcass protects the other battleship, who's thankful for the friend. And I get the feeling that this Frenchie, he's not happy with what he's seeing. And I think he just fired at the friendly Donskoy. So it's 2 versus 2. Enemy DD is capturing B point right now. Looks like once the friendly cruiser was dead, he went B straight away. And that could communicate that his intentions are to try and meet up with his teammate to turn it into a 2v2 or a 2v1. That's a good habit to get into. He could go for A point first, though. Both of those decisions are on the table, and his team's so far down, and there's only, 4.5 minutes left. I think they have to play for the kills. Now, they don't want to lose on points, but they got to get these kills. They can't let these ships run away. Nick Has Arrived's team basically benefited from a 2-base capture for probably like 15 minutes. So that's a significant margin to gain over your enemy. And it looks like the enemy DD did go A. So, Nick's pretty healthy. He still has access to 2 of his heals. The enemy Alsace is somewhere. I think he's trying to exit out the eastern side of Sea Point, based on the aircraft that we saw overhead. The friendly Dmitry Donskoy is unhealthy, and unfortunately, it's a Dmitry Donskoy, so it's going to be seen from space. I wouldn't be surprised if the Changmu can see the Dmitry Donskoy right now. And if the battleship gets a good shot, he's gone. Absolutely 100% gone. So Nick's just getting distance. He's really not aware. He looked towards the north and then looked towards the eastern side of Sea Point. And the Alsace is still in range of his secondaries. It's so annoying. And oh gosh, here comes the French 12 guns. Ooh. Gosh. The amount of guns is always an advantage. Don't let anyone ever tell you, oh, well, yeah, but it's Sigma is... No. Screw the Sigma. It's all about the guns. If you got 12 guns, you can have worse Sigma than a ship that has 8 guns, for example. And 16 guns are better than 12, right? So the French will hit a shell on your ship, and you will feel it fast. So the Dmitry, maybe ill-advised, goes back towards B point, immediately dies to the Changmu, I think, or the Alsace. Yeah, the Alsace. He got a broadside. So the enemy has 3 bases, and Nick needs to survive. The game is still their advantage, but he has to stop the bleeding. 3 bases stacks up really quickly. So he's headed straight for C, which, considering the situation, I don't know that there's anything else he could do. He doesn't have smoke. Remember, he chose a more ranged playstyle, which does sacrifice your ability to deal with the objective. But you should theoretically have more targets that will fire at you and not at teammates, which is always very beneficial. But he's capturing C point. Okay, so last known position of the enemy, somewhere between A and B for the Changmu. We got the enemy battleship that decided to head south. So he's going to try and probably come back to the southern side of Sea Point, behind that island chain. And depending on when this captures, we'll know if the enemy battleship happens to be in the capture, or maybe the enemy DD took an interesting approach. But Nick is basically watching the western entrance to Sea Point, the most logical location that the Changmu could come. And he is successful in capturing. And at this point, the time left on the clock It's gonna be close. I think he just needs to survive. And we get a little tell from the enemy. So there's an aircraft overhead. That means the enemy battleship is at the southern entrance to Sea Point. So he just needs to chill here. Just chill. And, oh, body spotted. Aha! As expected, the Changmu enters on the western side of Sea Point. So Nick's just opening up his guns. He's doing pretty good damage. Honestly, they're neck and neck, and Nick can't heal. But he has one advantage that the Changmu does not. He can use his torpedoes. The Changmu can't, because they only damage cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers. So Nick gets really brazen to get the torpedoes out. Are they going to make contact before the enemy gets one more salvo off? They do. We know the battleship's here because the aircraft's right overhead. Where is he? He must be right behind this island. And he's rounding the island. There's 2 seconds left. 1 second left. And with no time left on the clock, the battleship kills Nick Has Arrived and wins the game for his team. And that was an unbelievable finish to a game that was, looking pretty good for Nick's team. They had 2 bases to the enemy's 1. They just threw themselves away. And at the end of the game, Nick, I can't fault you for trying to make sure you can win the game. The Changmu's probably going to beat him in a gun duel. Changmu did not want to stay isolated, sort of dragged him into friendly battleship. And I can't say, maybe Nick should have stayed behind the island, but who's to say? Any number of things could have happened slightly differently. Enemy battleship takes 1 more second to travel behind that island. He doesn't get the shell off in time to travel to Nick. We're talking about a screenshot where the shell is point blank on Nick and not actually making contact. So Nick Has Arrived. Great game. I'm sorry you didn't win it. Thanks for sharing. I hope everyone appreciates this crazy ending to a game. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.